Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting of Leicestershire County Council. This is broadcast live via the Council's website and will be archived so you can view it afterwards. Members are reminded to put the microphone on before they speak and turn off when they're finished. Apologies of absence. We've received no apologies. Minutes. I move the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of July 2025 as taken, confirmed, read and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Urgent items. There are no urgent items. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest in respect of any items on the agenda? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to declare a non-registrable interest in item 7 as a member representing the County Council in the Harwood area. I would also like to declare a non-registrable interest.
Thank you very much. Any others? No? Thank you. Right. Item 4, medium-term financial strategy update, spending review and fair funding consultation. This report provides an update to the spending review and fair funding consultation and their potential impact on the Council's financial position. It also provides us an update on the approach to updating the Council's MTFs ahead of the budget setting process for 26-27. We have also received a supplementary report which sets out more detailed update, particularly in relation to fair funding. Declan Keegan, Director of Corporate Resource, will present the report, and then I will ask Helen to speak as Cabinet Lead Member. Thank you, Declan.
Thank you, Chair. As you outlined, the report does cover 3 broad areas, and I'll pick up the spending review section first. As expected, the spending review was very much dominated by NHS and Defence receiving extra funding. But due to the constrained national finances, this did leave other government departments rather hoping their settlements wouldn't be too bad. Local government in this context did relatively okay compared to many departments. There was reasonable recognition by government of the pressure that local services are under. Though it should be noted that things aren't likely to improve. It is just like there's not going to be sort of a decline in the position that we're already seeing through the spending. Those sort of local pressures will continue from 2 factors. Firstly, governments continue to assume that council tax can be raised at 5% for the next 3 years. But that assumption is made regardless of whether councils do in fact increase council tax. And so those resources are assumed to be sort of held locally regardless of the actual facts. And grants will be restricted. And for a growing county like Leicestershire, this can be a problem as the population is often not taken into account and likely to be lower than inflation when counted on a per head of population basis. The spending review didn't give any indication of the likely outcome of the national service reforms. News on SEND was eagerly awaited, but we'll have to wait until later in the year to see what the proposals are. The accounting override has been extended for 2 years to give time for the reforms to be implemented. Though the spending review sets the overall department spending limits, there'll now be required to be further work by government departments to set their own budgets, including grant allocations that will come to local government. We expect to be notified of these throughout the year, although some of them will not be likely to be informed until the end of the financial year. And any local government grants distributed by MHCLG themselves will be set through funding reforms, and final allocations of those are expected in December. Turning to funding reforms, as mentioned, the consultation has been released, and despite the document being extensive, it did not include all the assumptions, nor did it include any allocations to local authorities. This would have been helpful due to the sheer volume of change since the reforms were looked at over a decade ago. The County Council Network, who's sort of the lobby organisation for sort of local councils such as ourselves, are working to clarify the impacts so we'd have a reasonable idea of the impact of the changes. From the initial review, it does look like the County Council will make a small gain. Now, unfortunately, with the extent of the change, you can imagine with £700 million of funding potentially being changed, this could easily turn into a small loss depending on the assumptions that are actually used. The funding approach that's been proposed by the government combines an estimate of resources needed with the ability to raise council tax locally. It does not assess what resources are required to run local government services. It's just a mechanism to allocate the pot that is already there. And this is probably the biggest weakness of the approach that the government are adopting. The allocation of resources doesn't necessarily equate to the range or levels of service expected. In terms of the resource need assessments, we're seeing an increased assessment, and this looks to be primarily due to the population growth within Leicestershire over the last decade, which hasn't to date been accounted for. Unfortunately, the increase in deprivation weighting hasn't been as high as what feared, which should obviously play against an area like this. On the resource assessment side, councils such as Leicestershire County Council fare really badly because we can raise a high proportion of our assessed needs through council tax. Government is taking 100% of the income into account at a notional level of council tax rather than the actual tax raised, which in a similar way to spending review does bring into question how much local discretion you really have over council tax, baked into the funding allocations regardless of what. Proposed changes from what we can see are creating significant winners and losers. Inner London and Shire District Councils are expected to be the hardest hit. Shire counties are expected to see mixed results, with some significant losses in the south east. Metropolitan areas are the ones most likely to gain from these reforms. District council position is obviously a concern locally, with reorganisation on the horizon. Districts with high business rate gains will be amongst the worst hit. Business rate reset has been trailed for a few years, so some councils will have started to make preparations, but the losses will undoubtedly make reorganisation more difficult. The government is proposing significant damping mechanisms to just phase in the impact of the reforms. And as this is still a consultation exercise, significant changes are possible. Lobbying from London is already notable in this regard. The CCN are likely to take a leading role for counties, but will also be important for local representation to have its voice. Finally, turning to the MTFS update, paragraphs 69 and 70 of the report show some of the key uncertainties that are still outstanding. That means it's unlikely to be until before December that we have clarity on the funding position for the county. That said, the size of the gap that we have is very unlikely to disappear, so it's vital we continue to work on it. To support this, it is recommended that a procurement exercise is started for external support to undertake a comprehensive review for savings opportunities. Procurement would also look to put in place a framework for implementation support if the council wishes to use the appointed party to support implementation for any of the identified opportunities. It's proposed to return to Cabinet in the autumn with the outcome of the tender exercise. Recommendations are set out for the order paper.
Thank you. Could I call on Ms Butler to speak to the motion and to move the motion on the order paper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose this motion. Recent spending review presents real challenges for local government. Most of the projected increase in our core spending power isn't coming from central government. It's expected to come from higher council tax and business rates based on the assumption that every council will raise taxes to the maximum. That's not sustainable, and it's not fair on local residents who are already feeling the pressure of rising costs. With the population growing and demand for services rising, we could see funding from government grants fall per resident. The government is consulting on a new funding formula. Contrary to what was said at full council, it's highly complex and it doesn't give us the clarity we need. If multi-year settlements are implemented, this means that any gains or losses won't be fully felt until year 4. And what's especially disappointing is that, unlike in previous years, the government hasn't released any example figures alongside the consultation. That makes it harder for councils to plan and harder for residents to understand the real-world impact. At the moment, our medium-term financial strategy will still show a gap of 90 million. On top of this, we're facing a separate high needs deficit projected to reach over 100 million by 2028-29. Whilst the government has extended the statutory override, this just keeps the balance off the balance sheet until March 2028. That doesn't solve the issue, it delays it. Unless there's extra government support, this continues to pose a serious risk to our financial stability. It is a fact that Leicestershire remains the lowest funded county in the country. That's why we fully support working with Leicestershire MPs from all parties to fight for a fairer deal for our county. We believe in standing up for local people regardless of politics. In the meantime, we're not just waiting for central government to act, we're preparing to launch a procurement process to commission a council-wide savings review. There's no cost, contract or commitment at this stage. We're taking action, we're exploring every option. If it leads to a contract that complements the work of Reform's Doge team, then we'll consider that. If not, we walk away. But it makes sense to have all our options on the table.
Thank you for that. I will second the motion. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 5, Annual Treasury Management Strategy. This report advises on the action taken and the performance achieved in respect to the Treasury management activities of the Council 24-25. Declan Keegan, Director of Corporate Resource, will present the report, and I'll ask Helen to speak as Cabinet Lead Member. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in line with the SIPFA Code of Practice, this report summarises the Treasury management activity for the previous financial year. The report was presented to the Corporate Governance Committee in June. The report covers the Council's activities and policy compliance regarding investment of cash balances and borrowing. Turning first to the investments the Council makes, which is primarily lending to banks. All loans made during the year were compliant with the policy agreed at County Council were repaid on time with the interest due. There was one change in status for County Party during an active loan period. Following the government's sale of its final shareholding in NatWest Bank, the advised lending limit was reduced to fall in line with similar entities. This resulted in the Council having investments above the revised lower limit for approximately 3 months, which was the period until the investments naturally matured. Though not ideal, this eventuality was always likely to occur and wasn't of particular. Overall, the investment return exceeded the benchmark rate slightly for the year with minimal additional risk. Investments in private debt and bank risk share continue to make up a small proportion of the overall Treasury management activity, but added an important boost to the returns made on the Treasury management assets. Turning to the debt position, during the year, £44.5 million was repaid, reducing the Council's external debt position to £175 million. This is less than half of the peak debt position from 2006. Repayments were enabled by the increase in gilt yields, which reduced the early repayment cost. Council ended the year £20 million under borrowed, which indicates that the Council is repaying debt slightly quicker than the maturity profile would suggest. At the moment, the Council's cash position doesn't suggest new external loans will be required over the medium term, but this is dependent on being able to finance £94 million of borrowing required to fund the capital programme from internal banks. Recommendation to note the report is per the order paper.
Thank you, Declan. Could I ask Councillor Miss Butler to speak and move the motion on the order paper? Thank you.
And then, could I just move the motion?
Yeah. I will second that motion. Agreed. Thank you. Future of Bow Manor Hall and Park. This report provides us with historic and current performances as well as likely future performances of Bow Manor Hall. We've received supplementary reports which provides more information. Richard Hunt, Head of Catering, Hospitality and Country Parks, will present the report. I will ask Helen to speak as Cabinet Lead Member. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This report sets out the historic and future performance of Bow Manor Hall and Park. Bow Manor was built between 1842 and 1854 and has been owned by the council since 1974. And it's used as an outdoor education centre and a wedding and conferencing venue. It also hosts the registration service for the Charnwood area. The site and building are complex and they're costly to run effectively, and Bow Manor has never operated at a profit once all costs to operate the site are considered. Last financial year, Bow Manor's cost to the council was £459,000, and this year we are forecasting a cost to the council of £480,000 as a result of the temporary closure of the property whilst we made repairs to the historic chimneys in the hall. The report sets out in paragraphs 28 to 33 the operating context of Bow Manor and the wider market, and how, without changes at Bow Manor, it's unlikely that the financial position of the site will materially improve. The Scrutiny Commission review the council's portfolio of traded services annually and have conducted several workshops into the performance of Bow Manor. Following on from the workshops, the Commission received an exempt report at its meeting in March 2025, and the Commission concluded that the long-term projected performance of Bow Manor continued to be of concern, and concluded this should be considered further by the Cabinet, which led to this paper coming to Cabinet this afternoon. The paper recommends in points 37 to 42 that the Director of Corporate Resources is authorised to commence a targeted engagement process to help the Council to plan how the operation at Bow Manor can best be improved to drive financial improvements to ensure that the cost of the site to the taxpayer is reduced as quickly as possible. This engagement process will focus around three principal areas: the views of schools and other existing customers of the site, the views of the general public, and also the views of specialist operators within the sector. And we will also ensure that the views of staff are heard throughout the process. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Richard. I'd like to call on Ms Butler, Councillor Butler, to speak to the motion proposed.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I would like to propose the motion. I'm really excited about this because it's about taking an asset owned by County Hall that is currently operating at a cost to the taxpayer and opening up the conversation about what we could do differently. As Richard said, for this financial year, Bow Manor is forecast to make a loss of 480k. Bow Manor is a beautiful site, rich in history. There is so much potential here. So what we're doing today is opening up this for consultation. Engagement will commence in August and run for 2 months. We want your views, and I'm really urging you to take this opportunity to have your say. Importantly, we're not bringing forward any pre-decided options today. This is the genuine opportunity to shape the future of a valued local asset.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr Tilbury to second the motion, please?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I second the motion. Myself and Helen visited the site a couple of weeks ago with the esteemed gentleman over there. And Bow Manor is an exciting historical asset that LCC holds. Many people have wonderful memories there, including myself, either getting married or adventure weekends as a child. And I think there is so much potential at that site that we can actively look at. And echoing Helen's words, I think we'll put it out there to the public and everyone else to give us ideas on how to make this wonderful site a great asset and a paying asset for LCC. Thank you.
Thank you. You're seconding that motion.
And I second that motion.
Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 7, the latest position and proposed response to the consultation on further main modifications to the Charnwood local plan. This report provides updates on the Charnwood Borough Council's emerging local plan, set out as proposed approach to the further main modifications, consultation, and gives an update on the proposed implementation of the Community Infrastructure Levy. Julie Thomas, Head of Planning Historic Natural Environment, and Anne Carruthers, Director of Environment and Transport, will present the report. I will ask Mr Harrison to speak as, Harrison to speak as a lead member. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is the latest report on the progress of the Charnwood Local Plan Review. The date and summary of the contents of earlier reports are set out in paragraphs 8 to 13. The report also provides an update on the proposed implementation of the Community Infrastructure Level, or CIL, in relation to the identified cumulative highway and transportation impacts. The substantial number of sites allocated in the emerging local plan that have been or could in the near future be granted planning permission without contributing to the delivery of the identified cumulative highways and transport measures due to the lack of an agreed mechanism to secure strategic contributions have the potential to undermine the delivery of the necessary infrastructure over the life of the local plan. The Local Highway Authority considers that any further planning applications seeking to be determined in advance of the examining inspector's report should be considered as premature, and as such should be deferred for the time being. The Local Highway Authority will continue to review this position as the local plan examination and CIL process progress. As previously identified, the expedient adoption of a CIL is considered to be the best way to mitigate the potentially negative impacts of a lack of strategic transport investment needed to support growth in Charnwood. The actual proposed levels of CIL are subject to further viability work, public consultation and examination through the principle of CIL is supported. Contributions towards education, waste and libraries will be secured through the existing mechanism of Section 106, subject to viability. Current proposed main modifications to the local plan reflect the proposed implementation of a SIL. Main modifications are material changes to a submitted local plan which are necessary to make it sound and legally compliant. As previously identified, the expedient adoption of a SIL is the best way to mitigate the potentially negative impacts of a lack of strategic transport investment needed to support growth in the plan. The County Council is therefore supported with these further modifications in principle and will continue to seek to mitigate these impacts as far as practically possible. The County Council will continue to work with the Borough Council to ensure the implementation, administration and monitoring of SIL is managed in the most effective way. It is proposed to amend recommendation to include specific reference to SIL. As such, recommendation E2 has been inserted. This states the Chief Executive, Director of Environment and Transport and Director of Law and Governance, following consultation with the appropriate Cabinet Lead Member, be authorised to respond to formal and informal consultations on the development of SIL with reference to minimising risk to the County Council and its statutory role as required. There are no other material differences to the local plan's content that officers have any concerns about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anne, did you wish to speak? Okay, thank you. Could I then move on to Mr. Harrison Fowler, who will speak and move the motion on the order paper?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I would like to propose the motion on the order paper. The Charnwood local plan review has been going on for a number of years, and during that time, planning permission has been granted for several of the proposed site allocations, with further applications currently under review. Until now, under Section 106 framework alone, there has been no mechanism in place to secure the necessary contributions from developers to mitigate the impact of the highways and transport arising from these developments. The introduction of a community infrastructure levy is the best way forward to address this shortfall and should be adopted as soon as possible. The further main modifications predominantly involve adding in references to the proposed development of a SIL. As the County Council has concluded that a SIL is the most appropriate way to support the delivery of highways and transport measures needed to support this growth, the County Council is supportive of these amendments, and so am I as lead member.
You're moving, are you? Are you going to move?
As I say, yeah, I propose.
Thank you. Could I call on Mr. Charles Whitford to second the motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'm quite happy to second the motion.
Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Yep. Right, item 8, additional highways and transport funding awards 25-26. This report sets out the proposed changes to the existing highways and transport capital programme delivery. Also gives us update on the additional 22 million highway transport related funding award to the County Council since the current MTFs was approved in February. We're also being asked to approve the development and delivery of additional programme in relation to the latest funding awards. Anne Carruthers, Director of Environment and Transport, will present the report, and then I will ask Charles to speak as Cabinet Lead Member. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, as you say, Highways and Transport has seen a number of funding related changes since the agreement of the current MTFS, so this report combines those and gives an update. In summary, the additional funding is set out in Table 1 of the report, and I'll just highlight a few points on that. The funding we've received from Active Travel England for cycling and walking, we're proposing to combine that with developer contributions we have for the Market Harborough area, and that will allow us to implement and deliver a programme of work to address town centre junction constraints and improvements for cycling and walking connections within the Market Harborough area. We've also got further monies from Active Travel England for something that's called a Cyclops junction that's specifically designed for cyclists. And that improvement, however, we've taken out to consultation, and from the consultation feedback, we're proposing to redesign that junction. Active Travel England were keen we had a Cyclops junction. However, on building on the consultation, we're proposing that redesign of that. So we're working with Active Travel England on that. There are some potential risks with that approach, however, they're set out in paragraph 39, but on balance, we feel that that's the best way to go because we'll get a better outcome for cyclists with that money. So we wanted to make sure Cabinet were aware of those risks. We have a further stream of Active Travel England funding that's called Active Travel 5. They're in their 5th round, and we're proposing using that money enhancing routes to school. So supporting cycling and walking for that school journey. We all know how much the school journey can cause us a congestion issue at many of our communities. So that hopefully will help address that in some areas of the county. We've had an allocation in year of something called the Local Transport Grant. That was 12.3 million. That's the current financial year. And our priorities for that spend are set out in Appendix E of the report. That was announced, I think, in March this year. So we've had a wee bit of time to have a look at what we could spend on that. And as you'll see from that appendix, it's a mixture of maintenance works as well as some smaller highway improvement schemes. The report also updates on the latest financial position on our largest capital scheme, which I'm sure you're aware is the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, North East Distributor Road, and that's currently in construction. The scheme budget of 127.8 million was approved by Cabinet in September 24, and that included a 6 million cost pressures and risks being identified within that. The current difference of 7.25 between the budget and the forecast outturn is the situation we are in, and we're proposing that we are reallocating from our existing advanced design budget to meet that differential. We will only, however, draw that down as and when it is needed, and we'll continue to work with the contractor and third parties to drive down costs in that final stage of construction of that scheme. Last bit, really positive news from the spending review last month. We've been allocated a total of 73.9 million for local transport grant funding for 4 years starting next financial year. Now, this is the first time we've had multi-year allocations, which is a really positive thing because it allows us to draw up a pipeline over time and deliver that. So we get much better bang for buck, the bucks we're getting. In what we can deliver for our communities there. We will be working up those programmes and we will bring that back to Cabinet for approval in due course. Recommendations as per the order paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Could I call on Councillor Charles Whitford to move and to speak to the motion on the order paper, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move the motion, of course. As the Cabinet member for Highways, Transport and Waste, I am pleased to see additional investment in Leicestershire's highways. The additional local transport grant and maintenance allocation will support us keep the network safe and respond to community concerns and invest in the highway assets in a better valued way. In addition, I welcome investment in active travel measures to give communities choice about how they travel and also support the maximising of developed funding. I note that multi-year funding settlements have recently been announced, and this will give the department a chance to develop a pipeline of schemes for delivering and allowing for more efficient programmes to be delivered. I also acknowledge the challenges of the capital programme delivery outlined in the report, and I'm pleased to see these being addressed through planning and risk mitigating where possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whitford. Could I move on to Councillor Rakiki to second the motion?
Thank you very much, Chair. Really good news that we're going to spend such a lot of money on the highways. I look forward to the day when I don't have to weave in and out of potholes to get to County Hall and just keep the steering wheel straight. It gives me great pleasure to second the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Right. We move on now to Leicestershire County Council's approach to flooding. This report outlines the key roles and responsibilities of the County Council with respect to flooding and provides an overview of the impact of flooding events. It also sets out proposed priorities for further funding for consideration as part of the 2026/30 MTFs. Comments have been received from Mr. Innes CC, and these are attached to the order paper Mark 9. Anne Carruthers, Director of Environment Transport, will present the report, and then I'll ask Adam to speak as Cabinet lead member. Thank you.
Thank you. Cabinet's aware that LCC has a role as the lead local flood authority. That means we have the role of producing a local flood risk management strategy for the county and for coordinating what we call the flood risk management agencies. They are, along with us, responsible for coordinating a response to flooding, given their roles within the water and flooding arena. Those risk management authorities include the Environment Agency, Severn Trent Water, district authorities, ourselves as the Highway Authority for highway drainage, as well as district authorities and riparian owners. Basically, that's private landowners. So you can see it's a very complex picture of flooding and managing flooding. We have a role in investigating when flooding incidents have happened and regulating work on ordinary water courses, and also as a statutory consultee on planning applications or major planning applications. I would highlight, however, that the LLFA, the Lead Local Flood Authority, do not have the responsibility or powers to implement a solution to flooding. Often that's a common misconception. We don't have that power, responsibility or funding to be able to do that. We coordinate the agencies who have a finger in the pie, so to speak. Members will be aware that the county's seen an increasing number and increasing severity of flooding incidents over the last few years. And it's become clear to us that our core budgets, both on the highway side of it and on the Lead Local Flood Authority side of it, are insufficient to deal with the level of work that's now becoming business as usual. So this report sets out how we would seek to spend additional monies if they became available through the MTFS process and the priorities for that additional spend. In summary, we would undertake more proactive highway drainage works on the highway side of it, and then on the Lead Local Flood Authority side of it, we would additional resources would become available then, or we would enable further resources to carry out flood investigation work at a quicker pace, because we're inundated with that, unfortunately, at the moment. We would carry out more community engagement work, particularly around building resilience within those communities to help themselves and to support riparian owners undertake the work that they are due to, or they are required to do. Subject to Cabinet approval of the recommendations set out in the report, the priorities highlighted would be fully considered as part of the next MTFS proposal. And sorry, just one other thing that we were proposing to do would be an element of community grant funding as well, for those areas where a small amount of funding could make a big difference to help build their resilience to funding within that community. And you've mentioned, Leader, the submission from Councillor Innes regarding specific flood risk in the Melton area. He just mentioned specifically the River Eye. That is the responsibility of the Environment Agency, although maintenance for that does fall to the riparian owners. A serious issue for that community, obviously, but I would also highlight there's many similar communities, unfortunately, across the county who have similar flooding concerns and issues. And we as a Lead Local Flood Authority will continue to work with the other relevant agencies and those communities to support them and help minimise the risk of flooding in future. The recommendations are as per the order paper.
Thank you, Anne. Could I ask Mr. Tilbury to speak and move the motion on the order paper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Anne. I will move to forward the motion. I will say anyone who has had their home or business flooded will know the devastating effects it has. People all over the county are still feeling the effects of Storm Hank even now. Flood is my #1 priority in my cabinet role and is absolutely critical. I cannot say that enough. I'm hoping to work cross-party to ensure Leicestershire has a ready plan. We'll stand stronger together. And if you could record these moments, Mr. Chairman, of what I'm going to do. I'm due to visit Melton to look at the poor state of the rivers. I'm due to visit Beacon Hill, where the natural flood management system I'm due to visit Market Harbour and speak with the local flood wardens there. I'm going to visit our flood works on Breeding on the Hill that's currently underway. I'm also trying to visit the Grand Union Canal in Loughborough, which was a scene of terrible flooding that many residents had their homes flooded. I'll give feedback on those visits once completed, and I'll conclude. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Could I call upon Councillor Bone to second the motion?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Right, number 10, proposal for reprioritising net zero action plans. This report is seeking our views on the reallocation of the 2 million carbon reduction reserve and to change the focus of activities delivered under net zero action plan. We've received comments from Mrs. Taylor on this item, and these are attached to the order paper marked 10. Anne Carruthers, Director of Environment Transport, will present the report, and I will ask Adam to speak as Cabinet Lead Member. Anne, thank you.
Chair, if it's all right, I was just going to hand over to my Assistant Director for Environment Waste, Joanna Gill, to present.
Yeah.
Thank you. And through yourself, Leader, officers have sought to set out in this report our understanding of what the administration would look to do linked to reallocating a £2 million corporate reserve and a refocusing of net zero activities within the net zero policy action plans. For context, the body of the report sets out the history of the Council's adopted key policies in this area, both in respect of the overarching environment strategy and more specifically the net zero strategy and action plans, including the most recent revisions considered and approved by Cabinet in February of this year, which saw a more pointed approach to net zero, reflecting the increasing financial constraints position of the Council. Currently, these plans align with the Council's strategic plan under the Clean and Green outcome, as well as any relevant national legislation. As for the proposals themselves, they suggest a change of focus in the activities delivered under the net zero action plans. So less carbon focused and more a move towards climate adaptation and responding to severe weather events, as well as projects that deliver financial savings and or additional social or environmental benefits. In respect of the £2 million corporate reserve, which was originally set aside in 2022 as a means to pump prime new carbon reduction initiatives for the Council, the Leader has proposed that the reserve be reallocated towards flood initiatives and adapting services to mitigate the impact of severe weather events. So that could include absolutely flooding, but also extreme heat. And there are some examples of projects that are referenced at point 16 in the report. Additionally, for members' information, the paper does set out the legal position on this matter, including national duties under the Climate Change Act, how local authorities might support that currently, and it does allude to the possibility of future legal requirements to take positive action to combat climate change, and that could include possible future targets. As regards the need or not to publicly consult on the proposed changes, the report as it stands does not seek to remove the policy. Rather, it's a high-level refocusing of strategic direction and differing priorities, as previously mentioned. So the duty would not be to consult would not be required as set out. The report does set out potential equality, human rights and environmental implications of the changes so that members might take those into account when they're considering this issue today. Lastly, subject to Cabinet approval of the recommendations, officers will revise the net zero action plans to reflect the refocused approach, and they will be presented to the Environment and Climate Change Overview and Scrutiny Committee alongside the annual environmental performance report before being brought back to this Cabinet. That, Leader, I would refer Cabinet to the recommendations as set out on the order paper.
Thank you very much for that, Joanne. Mr. Tilbury to speak and move the motion on the order paper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Anne. Yes, we are hoping to move funds from net zero to flooding because the threat of flooding is here and now. As a country, we are going to spend billions and billions on net zero. Yet if we became net zero tomorrow, as a country or as a world, no one can tell us how much that would affect the climate or the temperature. Yesterday, the said question was asked to Ed Miliband, and he simply couldn't answer the question. One thing that people don't want to discuss is a positive aspect that small increase in CO2 has had on the world. We're currently going through the Great Greening. Since the 1980s, we've had 16 to 17% more vegetation on Earth than during the 1980s. That's a continent the size of North America. That CO2 is plant food. Also, history tells us CO2 doesn't really have that much sway on climate. During the population spike of the Roman Empire, the average global temperature was on average 5 degrees warmer than it is now. CO2 was only at 200 parts per million. We're currently about 430 parts per million. In conclusion, I fully support moving the funds into flooding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I call upon Mr. Bone to second the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to second that. I think it's absolutely great to see us starting to scrap the wasteful, net, stupid zero agenda and instead putting funding towards something that actually matters, like tackling flooding, which has been neglected for far too long here in Leicestershire. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I call upon Mr. Fowler to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. For the benefit of the public, I want to remove some of the smoke and mirrors covering the facts around this issue. UK authorities of all sizes like to parade their net zero efforts around like some badge of honour. But in reality, it's nothing more than shallow virtue signalling and PR. We can all have our own views about global temperatures and climate change historically, as Mr. Tilbury pointed out. But these are on a macro scale. In terms of Leicestershire County Council's impact, the facts are undeniable. As a country, the United Kingdom contributes 0.46% of global carbon emissions, according to up-to-date reports. Whilst Leicestershire's proportion of that isn't public knowledge to the specific, a per capita figure can be drawn. 750,000 people is the approximate population of the county, which is about 1% of the population of the United Kingdom as a whole. It's reasonable to infer that Leicestershire's carbon emissions are proportionate to that fraction. In total, combined together, that stands Leicestershire's carbon emissions as a percentage of the global total at 0.005%. To put this into perspective, I want to use an analogy. Let's say you have Wembley Stadium full of 80,000 fans, typical event. And let's say that each of those seats that are filled make up 1 unit of carbon emissions. Now, if Leicestershire today went fully net zero, the difference that we would see in that entire 80,000 crowd is 4 people leaving to go to the toilet. You wouldn't even know they've gone. This isn't about ideology, not about politics. It's about maths. It's about utility. It's about common sense.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Is the motion agreed? Yep. Item 11, home care for Leicester procurement. This report seeks the approval to progress with procurement of home care contracts for the period 2026 to 2034. Following comments received from Mr. Innes, which are attached to the order paper marked 11. It has been suggested that further discussions is needed on this item, and it will be therefore deferred for this to take place. A decision will then be taken by the Director of Adults and Communities under delegated powers following consultation with lead members, the leader of the council. I will ask Joseph to speak as lead member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, the intention is to defer the decision on this item. So therefore, the recommendation has been changed from the public report, and I would like to move this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Squires to second the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to second the motion on the order paper. Presently, the current contract is in place until October 2026. This does allow for enough time to make the necessary amendments to the proposed process to ensure that it's fit for purpose and offers sufficient financial protection to reinforce sustainability. I note and concur with the comments from Mr. Innes regarding the lack of cost-saving incentives. namely a set hourly rate which is comparatively high when compared regionally. Set hourly rates do not incentivise cost cutting, as well as there being little to no punitive element to providers that are not meeting contractual obligations. In the event of a provider failing to meet their contractual obligations, it is unfortunate that the current and proposed aim is for Leicestershire County Council to invest more time and resources with little to no threat of formal enforcement to the care provider. Evidence suggests that a robust enforcement policy improves standards whilst reducing costs. I note that similar issues were identified in scrutiny, but were not acted upon. However, aside from that, the proposal is substantially a good proposal and does downgrade the rurality of some areas of the county, which does lead to substantial cost saving in comparison to the current home care procurement process.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 12, transitioning to banded model for education, health and care plan funding. This report seeks approval to consult with Leicestershire schools on moving to a banded model for assessing needs and determining top-up funding for education, health and care plans for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. Sharon Cook, Assistant Director for Children and Families Services, and Michelle White, Head of Services, will present the report. I'll then ask Charles to speak as Cabinet Lead Member. Good afternoon, ladies, and thank you.
Sorry. You have before you a report that's been completed talking about transitioning to a branded model for our education, health and care plan funding. My colleague, Michelle White, who's the Head of Service for SEN, is here to brief on the report, and then we're happy to take any questions that you may have. Okay, hello.
Hello.
So the report was agreed back in Cabinet in June for us to present today. So we're proposing a banded model to education, health and care plans for the local authority, moving away from a more sort of specific, detailed model that predominantly focuses on teaching assistant hours in an education, health and care plan. So the premise of the new model will allow our settings around Leicestershire to offer a much more sort of flexible, creative model to supporting young people in school. At the moment, the LSA directed model really provides quite a restricted model of delivery for schools, where schools are finding they've got classrooms with a number of adults supporting young people, and they're not allowed the flexibility to move with the changing needs of the child. So we've presented to you within the report a banding descriptor where a child's needs have been detailed through advice from our principal education psychologist and our lead for specialist teaching, looking at what the needs are for a particular child at a banding level, what provision we'd be expecting to see within that classroom, and then funding a portion to that. And what that would then mean is the school can then be much more flexible with that funding to how they provide that support for that young person. So we're proposing that we go out to consultation at the 1st of September for a 6-week period. We'll be working with schools on that consultation. We'll then come back and review that. And then hopefully, if there are no particular concerns of significance, we'd be looking to roll that model out with our mainstream settings in Leicestershire come the beginning of November.
Thank you. Could I call upon Mr. Charles Buckley to move and speak to the motion on the order paper? Thank you.
The Children and Family Services Department is committed to improving the outcomes for children in Leicestershire with additional needs. So the introduction of a banded model for the education, health and care plan funding is truly a step in the right direction to giving schools, as you've mentioned, the flexibility that they require to meet the adapting needs of children who are with these additional needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I call upon Mr. Squires to second the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to second the motion on the order paper. A consultation for the transition to a banded model for EHCPs is in line with the current evidence-based model of offering needs-based rather than diagnosis-based services. Consequently, an amendment to the needs descriptors and banding approaches can be used to accurately reflect the needs of each individual child and may reduce the need for some children to be moved, often unnecessarily and to their detriment, to special education needs establishments. This would allow for schools to offer a more tailored, flexible and creative approach to the holistic wellbeing and education of children who are identified to have a special educational need, and may avoid situations where children can be over-supported in a classroom, as you say, with multiple adults supporting children under EHCPs. That can be detrimental to their independence and social skills, which we do know as a wider determinant supports education and health more widely. I've recently met with a constituent who's explained to me in detail the consequences of the current delays in updating EHCPs and the effect this can have upon a child. I note the spectacular work being performed by Councillor Pugsley in this area, in this critical area, including his proposal for a brand new, beautiful SEN strategy. The combined effect of these proposals is expected to significantly reduce delays in EHCPs whilst personalising education to each child.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to item 13, referred from the Overview Scrutiny Committee. There are no items referred to from the Overview Scrutiny Committee. Urgent items, there are no urgent items. Item 15, exclusion of press and public. And I move that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the following items of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 and 10 of part 1 of the schedule 12A of the Act, and that all circumstances the case of the public interest is maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosure the information. Is everyone agreed? Thank you.